For 54 years, you've been told the same lie. Every one of them promised lower inflation, lower cost of living, more jobs. But behind the scenes, a carefully designed system is racking up $80,000 in debt every second, every minute another million. And by the time you finish watching this video, they'll owe another 90 million. And you're on the hook for it. You ask the questions they won't answer. Why don't I have a job? Why can't I afford groceries anymore? Why does rent keep rising? You look at the world around you and nothing seems to make sense anymore.
Really one trading session left in the year and markets are really flat.
You don't know what's causing it, but you know this is normal. You're being told the economy is booming, yet somehow you can't even afford to buy the home your parents had. And yet they tell you America is winning, but it sure doesn't feel like it. They just don't seem to care. And if you ever wonder why you're working harder but getting nowhere, then pay very close attention now. Because the answer to all those problems was set in motion 54 years ago, when one man designed a $38 trillion debt scam that you'll never escape. For decades, we lived under a reassuring illusion. We were told that the money in our pocket, the dollar, was solid, it was reliable, it was in fact as good as gold. It was the foundation of the global financial system. Every dollar held by any nation, bank, or individual was redeemable for a fixed amount of physical gold. It was a constraint, it was a check on power, and it was the last barrier standing between us and financial chaos. But that entire foundation of trust, the very bedrock of the global economy, was about to be shattered in a quiet act of betrayal, hidden in plain sight. The date was August 15, 1971, a Sunday evening. Most Americans were watching TV completely unaware that the president was about to change the course of economic history forever. Richard Nixon walked into the Oval Office that night facing a problem. Foreign countries were demanding gold in exchange for their dollars. They could see the writing on the wall that America was spending more money than it had gold to back it up. The Vietnam War, the space program, massive social spending, all of it was funded by printing dollars that was supposed to be backed by gold. But there wasn't enough gold, not even close. So Nixon did something that no US president had ever done before. He went on live television and gave a speech, and in less than 18 minutes, Nixon changed the value of every dollar on Earth. No vote, no debate, no citizen asked. Most Americans didn't fully understand what he was talking about. But with this speech, he committed the most massive and elegant heist in human history.
The strength of a nation's currency is based on the strength of that nation's economy. And the American economy is by far the strongest in the world. Accordingly, I have directed the Secretary of the Treasury to take the action necessary to defend the dollar against the speculators. I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets, except in amounts and conditions determined to be in the interest of monetary...
Nixon made it sound normal, almost routine. But what he did not say was that the US was about to break its promise to the world. What he was actually doing was pulling the plug on the entire system, and with a few calm words, Nixon closed the gold window and broke the final direct link between the US dollar and gold. And it gave the US a very unique privilege. They could now print the world's money. But the temptation to abuse this power proved too great. And here's the proof. In 1971, the US national debt was just $398 billion. In 2025, it's $38 trillion. Think about the sheer audacity of that moment. For centuries, currency was value, it was a promise backed by something real. But in that instant, it became something else entirely. The dollar became what we now call a fiat currency, money backed only by the government's decree and our collective manufactured belief in it. In other words, Nixon took people's gold away from them and gave them paper bills instead. But these bills rapidly began losing its value. So the question really became, if the dollar is no longer backed by gold, what is it backed by? The answer is simple and terrifying. It's debt. And the cost of that debt is staggering. It took the US more than 200 years to accumulate its first $1 trillion in debt. and today we pay that same amount just in interest every single year. This was the quiet birth of the debt system. Without the gold standard, the government and the Federal Reserve was suddenly given a godlike power, the power to create money out of thin air. And once money could be created without limit, your cost of living could rise without limit. The immediate consequence was the relentless systematic inflation that has been robbing your purchasing power ever since.
If you want to buy a foreign car or take a trip abroad, market conditions may cause your dollar to buy slightly less. But if you are among the overwhelming majority of Americans who buy American-made products in America, your dollar will be worth just as much tomorrow as it is today.
The US dollar has lost 98% of its purchasing power since 1971, meaning the dollar you earn today is worth less tomorrow, not because you failed to work hard, but because they created a monster of a debt system 54 years ago, with no regard for how it would affect future generations. It created a world where the only way to stay ahead is to borrow and leverage, constantly chasing a finish line that moves further and further away. Now, Nixon told the world that this was a temporary necessity, but the reality is it was the very moment the financial elite uncuffed themselves, paving the way for the debt-fueled economy we're all trapped in today.
You control the debt. You control everything.
But if the dollar is now backed by debt, the next question is terrifyingly simple. Where does the money to fund the debt actually come from? They make it sound so harmless, calling it quantitative easing, open market operations to confuse you. But what they don't tell you is the terrifying part. The money used to buy the debt is created out of thin air. It doesn't actually exist.
The U.S. government can't go bankrupt because we can print our own money. Well, again, some of this stuff gets, some of the language and concepts are just confusing. I mean, the government definitely prints money, and it definitely lends that money, which is why the government definitely prints money, and then it lends that money by selling bonds. Is that what they do? They sell bonds. Yeah, they sell bonds, right? Because they sell bonds and people buy the bonds and lend them the money. Yeah, so.
Since 2020, the US has printed nearly 80% of all US dollars in existence. To put that in perspective, at the start of 2020, there was $4 trillion in circulation. Now there's nearly $19 trillion. An explosion of money this large is not an accident. It's the necessary fuel for the debt system they so carefully designed. And to understand how this system really works, we need a simple analogy. Think of the US government like a person who constantly overspends. They run a deficit. They need money to pay for everything they promised, but they don't have it. So they do what any deeply indebted person does. They issue an IOU. These IOUs are called treasury bonds. And when the US government needs $1 trillion, they write a $1 trillion IOU and put it up for sale, promising to pay back the principal plus interest later on. And this is the government accumulating debt. Now pay very close attention, because this is the key to understanding this whole thing. The government, the state, the administration, they're all addicted to spending. They have promised more than they can deliver, and every single year they run a massive deficit. They collect taxes from you and me, but they spend far more than they collect. And to fill that gap, the government has to borrow. So they issue IOUs and sell them to anyone who will buy. Foreign nations, massive banks, even your grandmother's pension fund. But what's wrong with the US borrowing money? I'm sure they'll pay it back. Well, for a long time the world trusted that America would. However, the stack of IOUs is now so massive, 38 trillion, that the world is starting to get nervous. They're buying less. And that creates a problem for the system. If the world stops buying the IOUs, the entire machine seizes up. Enter the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is presented as a neutral referee, but it's anything but. When the government needs to borrow money and the world won't buy the IOUs, the Fed steps in. And this is where the scam is executed. When the Fed buys $1 trillion of government debt, they don't use money they already have. No, instead they simply press a few buttons on a computer and add a few more zeros into existence. And there you have it. $1 trillion created out of thin air. No collateral, no value, just numbers on a computer. Money that never existed until that precise moment. Think of it as the ultimate financial cheat code. It's not borrowing, it's manufacturing the currency required to pay the bills. And this is the infinite money loop.
It's just money. It's made up. Pieces of paper with pictures on it, so...
And who pays the price for this digital fabrication? It's not the government, it's not the Fed, it's you. Because the moment that $1 trillion of new, fresh, unbacked money enters the system, it devalues every single dollar already in existence. It's a silent, invisible tax called inflation. It means the value of the money in your bank account, the money you work so hard for, becomes worth less. It's the greatest financial scam of all time, and is executed with a click of a mouse. So here's the thing. The government owes money to itself, created from nothing, and pays interest on money that never existed. The US national debt didn't grow because America needed it. It grew because the system demanded it. But the terrifying truth is that this system Nixon created, where a state finances its consumption by devaluing its currency or increasing debt to the point of destruction, is not modern economics. It's the final, fatal chapter in the life of every great empire. You see, America is not special. We're simply following a script written thousands of years ago. The lie they tell you is that the infinite money loop is sustainable, that this time the rules don't apply, that we are too big to fail. 3 superpowers believed the same thing. All 3 collapsed, following the exact same pattern. Now let me show you how this ends. Spain, in 1590. They control half the world's gold and silver, more wealth than any nation in history. But they wanted more power than they could afford. So they started mixing copper into silver coins. And while the citizens slept, the king stole 70% of their purchasing power. Prices doubled, then tripled, and within just 80 years the empire was gone. Not from war, but from currency collapse and inflation. The Great Britain in 1914. They ruled global trade. The pound was the world's reserve currency. But they borrowed too much to fight wars, so they abandoned the gold standard. Sound familiar? The pound fell 25% overnight, affordability collapsed, and within 40 years, the empire dissolved. Not from invasion, but from debt and devaluation. The Soviet Union in 1985, a nuclear superpower with 30,000 weapons. They printed rubles to pay their bills, and within 6 years, inflation made the ruble worthless. The empire collapsed in just 900 days, not from rebellion, but from economic failure. Now the history books will tell you about kings and empires, but they don't tell you about the common man. They don't tell you about the Spanish merchant who watched his lifetime of savings turn to copper dust. They don't tell you about the British worker who saw his wages halved overnight when the pound was devalued. They don't tell you about the Soviet citizen who needed a wheelbarrow full of rubles just to buy a single loaf of bread. The rich got richer, but the people who played by the rules, the families who saved, the workers who earned, were the ones who paid the price. Their money was stolen in broad daylight. But here's the most terrifying consequence of all. The financial collapse is always preceded by one other fatal flaw: loss of productive capacity. America doesn't make things anymore. We design, we finance, and we consume, but we don't produce. Our manufacturing base has been gutted, and we're dependent on foreign supply chains for everything: medicine, electronics, even military components. Spain, the Soviet Union, and the Great Britain each believed they were exceptional. Each believed that the rules didn't apply to them. But every single time, the result is the same. Prices double, then triple. Groceries become unaffordable, rent rises, inflation robs your purchasing power. Sounds familiar?
Tell me how it's affected you again. You know people who've lost their jobs and lost their homes?
Most people are working harder for less money than they were making 10 years ago. It is because we are in the grip of a failed economic theory. And this decision you're about to make better be about what kind of economic theory you want. Not just people saying, I'm going to go fix it, but what are we going to do? What I think we have to do is invest in American jobs, American education, control American health care costs, and bring the American people together again.
They say it's the golden age of America. But the truth is, right now more than 14 million American households are behind on their basic utility bills. Families are forced to choose between electricity and food. Maybe this is you, feeling the impact of the decisions made in Washington. You're likely working a job, maybe even two, just trying to keep up with life. You probably don't have much in savings. Your living expenses seem too high to be true. You might have credit card debt or student loans that needs taken care of. This isn't the American dream you were promised, is it? You walk through the grocery store and see the price of eggs, wondering when this became normal. That calculation you do at the gas pump just to manage to fill the tank halfway.
You gotta think through, hey, it's gonna cost us XYZ to fill up, it's gonna cost us XYZ if we go out and eat.
Or the sinking feeling when you look at the tuition bill for college. For a degree that promises you a job that might not even exist.
That demand for oil is outpacing supply.
You watching me pump my paycheck away?
This struggle is not a failure of character. It's the proof that the machine is working exactly as designed. We see the proof in almost every area of our lives. That weekly grocery run that cost $180 just a few years ago now costs $400 to $600. When the paycheck runs out, the credit company steps in. They watch you turn to buy now, pay later just to afford milk and eggs. BNPL is now used for groceries and transactions under $40. And the trap is set. Credit card interest rates are now hitting 22%. But you did everything right. You got the degree, you got the job. But a salary of $80,000 or $120,000 is now entirely consumed by rent, insurance, and debt. The safe career path no longer guarantees stability. If you need a face for this failure, look at the teacher on a $37,000 salary working a second job for DoorDash, or the 70-year-old widow forced to apply at Walgreens because she can't afford to retire. The American dream is not broken. It was dismantled on purpose. The final insult is ownership. Banks are now introducing 50-year mortgages, an admission that your income can never catch up. The housing market is incompatible with your wages. And even if you own your home, property taxes are jumping $5,000 to $8,000 in a single cycle. They're taking what you already have and what you already own. You're trying to save for a down payment, while hedge funds are buying the house next door. They can borrow money for almost nothing, leaving you to compete against unlimited credit. You lose. This is not a market failure. This is the hidden tax of inflation. And this is how the system is designed, and it's working as planned. But here is what they don't tell you. Do you remember that money is backed only by the government's decree and our collective manufactured belief in it? The real problem isn't the size of the debt. It's what happens when the world loses faith in America's ability to pay it back. It's already happening as we speak. And there is only 3 ways it ends. You think they have this under control. They don't. 2008 was the first crack. The financial system seized, banks stopped trusting each other's IOUs. So the Fed stepped in and printed $800 billion to stabilize the market. They called it quantitative easing.
I don't think anyone really expected a bank as big as Lehman to be in a position that it's in now.
It was a bailout dressed in academic language. And the message was clear. When the system breaks, we print. In 2020 they did it again, but 3 times larger. $2.2 trillion in stimulus, $4 trillion in Fed bond purchases, direct checks to citizens, all funded by debt that the Fed bought with money created in milliseconds. They told you it was temporary emergency relief, but the debt clock told a different story. It jumped $7 trillion in just 24 months, and the duct tape is coming loose. Inflation isn't transitory, it's structural. Interest rates can't stay low forever, and every rate hike crushes the housing market you can't afford anyway. China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, they're all trading oil in yuan, building BRICS payment system, dumping treasuries. Let's see what you see. The dollar's foundation is confidence, and the confidence is cracking. This isn't a prediction, it's math, and there's only 3 ways this ends. The first one is hyperinflation. They keep printing until the belief breaks, like Weimar Germany, where a loaf of bread cost a wheelbarrow of cash, or like Zimbabwe, where $1 trillion bills couldn't buy a bottle of water, or like Venezuela, where savings evaporated in 6 months. Your $100,000 retirement account, worth $10,000 in purchasing power within a year. Your pension, paid in dollars that can't cover rent. The government will blame speculators, foreign powers, economic terrorists. But the truth is much simpler. They printed until it broke. And the second one is austerity collapse. They try to stop the bleeding, slash social security, cut Medicare, eliminate public services, raise retirement age to 75. The debt is too big, they say. We must be responsible. But here is the trap. Austerity in a debt-based economy causes a death spiral. Less spending means less GDP. Less GDP means higher debt to GDP ratio. Higher ratio means higher borrowing costs. The economy contracts for a decade. You keep your job, but your salary gets cut. Your taxes rise. Your services vanish. It's a depression by policy, not accident. And the third way is the new order. They don't fix the system, they replace it. A digital dollar, programmable, traceable, and controllable. Every transaction is monitored. The financial freedom you have now, gone. Meanwhile, BRICS nations launch a commodity-backed currency. The dollar loses reserve status. American purchasing power drops 40% overnight. Import costs explode. Everything you buy, made in China, assembled in Vietnam, shipped on foreign vessels, costs twice as much. Your standard of living collapses without a single policy vote. Every US president adds to the debt. Every single one. Bush wars, Obama's stimulus, Trump's tax cuts, Biden's spending, they all print, they all borrow, they all kick the can. The system isn't broken, it's working exactly as planned. You can't vote your way out of this problem. You can't protest your way out of compound interest. You can't ignore your way out of currency collapse. But you can understand the system and how it works. You can protect what you have. The debt scam was built in 1971 by Nixon. But the question is, will you step out of it? Or will you wait until it snaps shut?